Hello, everyone. This is the Geo team, now joined by our new product designer, Sinjing. And today we're going to spend an hour talking about the user interface and user experience in Geo. If you are a systems administrator, it is time to rejoice because we're obviously going to solve all of your problems within the next hour. So that's what we're going to do.
Brilliant.
I have to do this now. It's tradition.
It's a thing now. Yes, it is.
It's a thing.
Yeah. If you hear me typing a lot during the conversation, it's because I'm capturing the notes into the discussion document. There deliberately isn't anything on the agenda because I wanted this to try and be a bit of an open-ended discussion. But the main goal that I'm trying to get from having us all on the call together is just to understand how we will all work together, because having a product designer is new for Geo. And I just want to figure out just the expectations between us of who is responsible for which piece, how that works, what that looks like, and most importantly, how we turn ideas into things that we ship. Mm-hmm. So with that in mind, that's sort of where I thought we need to get to by the end of the call.
Okay.
That sounds good.
Cool.
I think the first question I have is if you, Sinjing, had already some time to kind of look at the Geo, let's say, admin interface and all of the more user-facing parts that are not on the command line yet, or if that's something sort of on your to-do list yet.
Yeah, I think it's still on my to-do list because I haven't get there because GitLab onboarding has a lot of tick boxes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I think my part is not still yet there, but thanks to the talk that we had last week, so I have a general knowledge.
Super.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I can start because I obviously have expectations. So the way I imagine this going forward, and maybe I'll start with some history first. Geo as a product has, I would say, is quite back-end heavy. A lot of the work that the engineering team has been busy with happens sort of at the back end. So sometimes those are for example, now they are performance related, right? Optimizing some queries. Often they are sort of about adding or improving to existing functionality. And the way that has worked out, I think, in the last month is we add new features or we iterate on top of other features, but the user or the UI changes are not necessarily sort of top of mind, right? We have some patterns in the Geo interface that we can sort of copy, right, and iterate very quickly. Or our engineers are able to add some sort of small things to the UI as well. I think many of the engineers actually are quite capable in that regard, which is cool. But now the game is kind of changing a little bit because Zach is around and he is able to, I think, create a lot of functionality on the front end. And I saw, I actually was quite impressed. I saw the merge requests for example, design repositories that he's working on, right? And he's moving, I think, quite of the code to Vue, which is our front end framework.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that is not the case. So there's probably also a lot of sort of craft in the front end that we can tackle. But in any case, all of the things I said don't mean that we have no user-facing work to do, right? Actually, I think we have a lot of work to do. And and I think now, I think the task for us three is, at my perspective is, okay, we have maybe not every feature will necessarily have a UI component, that's fine, right? Most features, though, have some user experience, unless they're really completely back-end facing, and I think you can support us with that. But now we also have the opportunity to start tackling a lot of the sort of user stories where we are trying to understand how do systems administrators use Geo. Right? What are the expectations they have? Can they perform all the tasks that they want to, right? And if not, how can we enable them, right? And those are the discussions I'm looking forward to having. And I have some examples actually prepared to give you sort of a flavor of like some of the problems we have right now and that I think we should tackle. So yeah, that's me.
Yeah, and I think to follow on from that, again, I think Fabian's completely right there. The history of Geo is that it's very back-end heavy, and there's never been a big focus on the front-end aspect of it because the people who've traditionally used Geo are sysadmins and they're quite comfortable from the command line. But we want to try and make it more easy to use and just a better experience that is more visible and surfaceable from the UI for a number of different reasons. And when I look at what we have with the UI at the moment, it allows us to see certain information and not everything, and it allows us to do certain processes but not all. And it feels like it's something that has been iterated over to get to where we are, but we haven't had the opportunity to step back and say, what do we actually want to achieve from this, and what is it supposed to do as a whole product, not just as a set of functionality that's been built over time. And I think that's where it's really valuable having someone like yourself come and join us, because you're able to think about it from that perspective. Hey, Zach.
Hey, Zach.
Hey, I'm really sorry.
No worries. I'm taking notes in the Geo discussion doc at the same time, but we're just having a chat to start, really. So yeah, that's why I think, Sanjung, is really great that you're able to join us, because you'll be able to, one, look at it with really fresh eyes. And fresh eyes are always good because you see things that maybe we've started to gloss over having looked at it for a while. But you're also going to be able to look at it from a whole product perspective about what is this whole feature supposed to provide to our users, and how do we deliver that in a way that is easy to use and compelling and surfaces the functionality correctly, and all of those good things that product designers bring to the table. So yeah, that's why I'm really excited to figure out how to get started with this project.
Cool. Thanks. Hi, Jack.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Have you both met before?
Nope.
Oh, well, Zach, this is our new product designer. This is Zach, our front-end engineer. You shall now work with each other.
Yeah.
And go. Make it happen. So I think maybe a good thing to discuss as well is, I know, Sanjung, that you wouldn't necessarily know all of the processes around how GitLab works with product designers and how the product designers work with their teams. But I was wondering if you have certain practices that work for you that you are bringing within your experience here that have worked well for you in the past in terms of how to deal with engineering teams or how to work with product managers to realize what the products and features should look like if there's certain things that you want to still be doing in this role?
Yeah, sure. I think it depends on the product's characteristic and team's characteristic, of course. But like, thankfully, my previous experience was always surrounded by like tons of developers. So I'm very used to that environment. Very, very used. And personally, I like developer and talking to them because it's always fun. So I don't have any problem with that. But the thing is, like, I have looked into the product, I mean, not in a very detailed level yet. And this is my first time like working fully remotely. So I think there will be some challenge in the near future. But I saw the product designer's handbook and then like how the normal designer in the team like work in the team. I think it goes very well, presumably. But
well, like I said, we haven't been working with one intensively, so we're learning as much as you are in terms of how this is supposed to work. Hence asking if there's any specific processes that you want to follow already that you know about.
Well, like in my personal opinion, I really love to get the feedback from all the team. So not just from the designer, I would say this is very important for me to improve the quality of the design and also improving the user experience itself. Because this type of product, of course, I will dig into more detail about the technical things, but still I'm not a developer. So my knowledge will be not yet there. So I would love to listen to others' feedback, especially from the developer and of course from PM. Like this is kind of like daily activity. So sorry for when I will ping you a lot if I start using Sketch or whatever real design workflow. But that's the reason why I prefer to have some design review within the team. So this sometimes include the designers in other team, but that I would say it's kind of more similar to design critic. So design review, I would say this is just gathering feedback from the developers and the PM and the other dev related people giving me the feedback. But yeah, I can set up a ground rule, like, because this is how I prefer to improving my design. So I would love to have that design review session if this is doable. But my question is like, if I want to conduct this design review session, like, do I have to make it asynchronous, or do I have to set a certain time? And okay, this is kind of like recurring meeting, like bi-weekly, for example. So I was not so sure about this. So I'd like to ask you and listen to your opinion.
Well, what I would say is that it sounds like the design review is... Sorry, my husband works in the same study as me. What I would say is that it sounds like the design review is a process where you're going to be needing to get feedback from quite a number of people. And the way that the Geo team is located across the globe, it may be more beneficial to do that either with one-on-one sessions with individual people, or to post something up on a discussion issue where you gather feedback that way in an asynchronous way. That can be quite an adjustment when you're not used to doing it asynchronously, but it is absolutely worth the effort, because I think that you get quite a lot of benefit from the asynchronous process. I think people are given the opportunity to sit back and think about what they're observing or what they have read. They go away and think about it, have a sandwich, have a cup of tea, and then they come back and they provide really valuable comments on what they have seen. Sometimes that can be more valuable than what comes out off the top of someone's head in a one-to-one synchronous meeting. And we have a number of examples like that. Let me get a link where someone will propose an idea, put it up for discussion in a particular project, and then we go back and discuss what has happened. Although, come to think of it now, that discussion project is really for sort of meta things about how the team works or how the team operates. So I think what might be useful is to put up an issue in the main project that says, this is the design review, this is what I'm looking at, this is how the pieces this is how the pieces fit together in your mind, and ask for feedback that way, and then ping specific people depending on who you need the feedback from. And also that way, it's readable after the fact by anyone who's interested in it. And even though we record everything and put it up on YouTube, sometimes it's difficult to consume hours and hours of material, whereas a written discussion might be valuable. But I'd encourage you to experiment and see what works for you. You might find that 5 one-on-ones that are synchronous gives you more value than one asynchronous discussion. But I think everyone in the team is flexible with different processes and how people want to work. So I would definitely encourage asynchronous and give it a try. But I think we're open to either way.
Yeah. I think the one thing I would add is, from my perspective, we always have to strike this balance between having something like really well defined and planned, and actually like iterating and getting things out quickly, right? And I think this is I think something that we will like have to balance a little bit when we make changes to the UI, because sometimes maybe enough if you've heard from Zach, right, and you've heard from a customer, right, and you're like, okay, we can probably move forward with this because I feel confident in this change. If it is sort of a 3-month operation, right, then we lose a lot of velocity in the process, right? And I think that's always the challenge, right? I would like that. That's also sometimes my challenge, right? Because I would like to have tons of validation, right? But that's not feasible, right? So we need to have a light touch sometimes, but sometimes maybe it also really requires thinking very carefully about it, right? And that depends a little bit on what we're doing. Zach, what's your view?
As far as the meetings go?
Yeah, also in general.
Yeah, I like the idea of trying to start asynchronous. I find that the synchronous is nice, ad hoc, when we need it, kind of like right now. But having the asynchronous kind of place to communicate, honestly, just thinking about maybe a place to communicate about product design just in general would be nice, for kind of how we have that retrospective area where we can just drop notes in. I think that might be something we could do with product design too, where we have places that maybe as we're working through, we notice things maybe are for instance, with the customer and the notes about how the secondary UI is kind of useless from their opinion. It might be a good place to maybe track those sort of comments or those sort of feedback somewhere, kind of just having a bucket.
So actually, so we have this sort of geo customer project where I collect all of the customer feedback when I speak to people. But
okay,
I can show both of you. But maybe we need something similar, the geo design sort of issue, right? Which is
right.
Every time you notice something that you are unhappy with, you put it in there so we have it recorded and we can sort of talk through that.
Well, I think just raising the issue inside of the main project and associating a specific label with it, I think is enough, because if we do that, we can then link it back into the epics. At the same time, I'm concerned that if we keep it in a completely separate project, we might land up duplicating it over when we do it. So we just have to find out what that label is and apply it to those ideas that come up.
Yeah, because label filtering would work at that point. So that.
Yeah, and let me have a look. I mean, there is UX, right? Front end. There's design backlog. There's tons of design labels, design discovery, ideation, backlog. There's an entire workflow apparently. So,
well, then maybe what we need to do is, as Sanjung gets more comfortable with the role here, that you can propose the label that we need to add to those issues, because it might be some part of your workflow that needs to happen that we don't know about. So I think if we leave that open to you, then you can let us know how you want us to label them.
Yeah, actually, I have next Tuesday, I have a session with my UX buddy regarding how can we use design label better. So I'm not yet there yet. So I am not so sure about how can I label those things in a more structured way. But yeah, I think I'll be there pretty soon.
Okay, great. Well, I think another question that I've got was, the biggest project that we have coming up now is about changing the admin UI. Mm-hmm. And that in itself is a very ambiguous statement. Change the UI. Let's update it and make it better. And that is very, it's just so open. And but I'm wondering how we go from this ambiguous statement to actually getting down to workable issues. And is it something where we raise an epic and then we start raising issues for the design work itself and the research that needs to happen and the questions that need to get raised, and then all of that research is collected on the issues themselves, and then from there we can go and separate it out into sub-epics with Fabian's help? Does that sound like the right way to be going about this?
Yeah, I think so. Because I saw the UI and I would say this is pretty basic level. And also design team is planning to have the UX scorecard, and I think this will be applied to our team pretty soon, I think in December. So based on that criteria, I can go through the UI based on the heuristic evaluation, and then I can kind of suggest you that, okay, this has some usability problem, and then I can write down on the issues, and it could be one epic, or I don't know, how can I group them in a more proper way. But if I ask Fabian to help me, because I cannot create a very clear requirement at the moment. So.
Yeah, so I had two ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I have many ideas. So I think what we should do, or could do, is I'd say I have pretty good relationships with some of our very large customers. So VMware, Intel, NVIDIA, Goldman Sachs, PennyMac, like a few people I've spoken with before. And most of those folks are systems administrators, or at least they have like one or two systems administrators who are responsible for GitLab and who are aware of Geo. And so maybe what we could do is schedule some open sort of interviews with those people and say, just show me, what you use the Geo AI for UI for the last time, right? And then just let them talk through, like what they do on the UI, and get sort of a baseline of what those folks actually expect when they use our user interface. And I think just from gathering that data, we'll probably get a lot more insight into what sort of the expectations are, where we fall short, what the annoyances are, right? But focus it really on like a more sort of, I've just finished my continuous interviewing course, so I'm going to just say it. It's like sort of eliciting the stories of what these people are trying to accomplish, right? And I think that may help us then prioritize specific things to improve in the product. That's sort of the one thing that I think we just need to do, and that's maybe quite time consuming, but I think otherwise it's hard, right?
Yeah.
That being said, I also think that through like support issues and things that like happened in the past, we may have like 2 or 3 things already where we are relatively certain that they are problems that we need to solve, right? Where we don't need to talk to customers first. I have an example of something that like happened that we can look at as well. And so if we pick like a few of those, we can then also discuss this, like, okay, how do we move them like forward? Like, is there maybe an opportunity for redesigning? Is there an opportunity for Zach to refactor and improve our front end? And that becomes a little bit more concrete, right? Because I think there are, like, we already know of some tasks that we are not able to perform or that are not great. And we can just sort of move them along as well. And I think that gives us sort of a good balance of discovery and concretely already generating value. Because one of the big risks that I see is we could probably just like remove the entire UI and start from scratch, right? It's like, because I don't think there's a lot of design consideration, like sort of holistically. It was iterated upon. It is functional at a minimal level, but that's about it. But I would like to avoid sort of a big sort of value deferral into the future, where like we need to like go away for 6 months and then we're going to like pop out with this like amazing thing. So I think maybe we can like do this sort of dual track thing in the beginning, where we pick a few examples of where we already think we can make a difference, start working on them, and that may also help us understand how we can work with each other, right? What are your requirements? And then also schedule those interviews and actually like listen very carefully to the systems administrators.
I think too, Eileen would probably be good to kind of talk to. I think she would have maybe some good questions to help prepare us for a meeting like that.
Yes.
But personally, I think it would be extremely beneficial to talk with the customers and kind of just watch them work through our UI along. And of course, if there's some straightforward issues that we can tackle as well, but I get nervous a little bit of making assumptions too. So like you said, most of them are concrete. And so but yeah, instead of, making assumptions of what the UI should be and then doing this huge refactor, I think talking to them first would be monumental.
Yeah, I think that's actually a lot easier than some other interviews that I tried and failed to schedule, because the people that talk to us generally are the systems administrators, because they know about Geo. So we're relatively close to them. So that's a first step.
Cool.
So Fabian, if I summarize there, it sounds like because of customer interactions that we've already had, we have some very concrete ideas on improvements we need to make, and those are issues that exist in the system already, and we need to do those.
Yes.
But we still need to work with Sanjung on those to just firm up the idea that is there and how that fits into the UI as a whole. And then on a separate track, it's about reevaluating the UI that exists.
Yes. And I think if we can get like 5 interviews in 12.6, right, and just learning from our customers and then putting them into issues and into like having those discussions about priorities and what we can and can't do would be pretty good.
Yeah, actually, that was what I was going to suggest us to have. Like Fabian, you got the right point, I guess, because normally as a UX designer, we start from like the discovery phase. We meet the user or interviewing the user, and based on that like observation, normally I would like to come up with some journey map. So this could be their daily life. And if we provide this user flow for them, this will reduce their pain level of their daily life, for example. Yeah. So like you said, I can also start looking into the research document and research related issue in the design repo. Mm-hmm. At the same time, we also have some issues. Some of the things might be very critical and some of the things might be very like minor usability issues or something. So I can work on it. So I think it's a very good idea. And if I just start working on 1 or 2 issue, and then I think probably I can suggest you to, hey, let's just change this workflow in this way or either this way, because I haven't worked on Sketch yet in this company. So I really have no idea yet.
Yeah, and that's perfectly fine. But and I'm also happy, like I would prefer us to do more, well, not more, but I would like to have a discovery phase where we say like, first, we're going to do this, and understand the problems better. And then, we're going to jump into implementation. And it doesn't need to be crazy elaborate, but I think talking to some people first will probably help us a lot. I think, yep.
So from that perspective, it sounds like you and Sanjung will probably be spending a lot of time in the discovery phase, which then gets translated into the requirements that then the team picks up to act on.
Yes. And I think, I don't want to be hasty, but I am going to go on paternity leave probably in 2 to 3 weeks. So I think if I can sort of like, I will probably this week create an epic, right? And then a sub epic saying like discovery, like product design discovery on this, right? And then I'm going to like document this and involve Eileen. And I probably make a few confidential issues or like some other place where I say like, and I believe these are the people we should contact in order to get the information that we need, right? Because unfortunately, scheduling all of this like interview stuff is a lot of work. but it needs to happen, right? And I think I'd like to jot down my thoughts because from my experience, GitLab is terribly unorganized in like having that information anywhere, right? It's like, I don't think you can like go to a place and say, hey, I would like to talk to systems administrators in companies that use Geo. That resource does not exist, unfortunately, other than in my Geo customer project. So, cool.
The other thing I wanted to ask, so it sounds like, Fabian, you're going to be creating issues in epics and will contain that information about the customers. I think then we also need to identify what those other concrete issues are that you're talking about so that we can figure out about scheduling those.
Yes, so I still have to go through some of the backlog. Handily, I have one thing that I would like to discuss. Maybe we can even discuss it now because it's, I'd like to hear your opinion on it. That was actually like something that happened like over the last 2 weeks. So this maybe gives us a little bit more of a concrete thing to talk about.
Can I just say one thing before we start talking about concrete things? The other thing I just wanted to say, I'm pretty sure I've said this to Zach already, but also just to Sungjung as well. I'm very much for figuring out a way to work together that makes sense for the team. And if there's any proposals for how we can work together more effectively or things that we need to change to be able to deliver value better, I really encourage those ideas coming forward and being discussed, because the most important thing for me is having an effective team. I don't want to just follow process because that's like the way that it might be done or the way that it's been done in the past. So if you have ideas that you want to put forward, please, by all means, raise them. Let's discuss. Let's try and adopt those. I just wanted to put that out there before we get into something concrete, because that I think is really important to me, that you feel comfortable with proposing change. So
yes, I'd love to. If I get the context, I think by this week, and then probably I'll start suggesting something new with the designer's perspective.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, my 2 cents are, I am exactly the opposite. There's process, we shall follow it. No, it's like I think this is something, I think Rachel and I are pretty aligned in this regard. We do things sometimes a little bit differently in Geo. If we feel that makes sense and makes the team productive. So don't feel obliged to follow this one process just because it is written down somewhere, but let's see if we can make some changes, and then we can also try to merge those changes back into the bigger process if we have success with them, right? Because I think that's the important thing. It's like if we do things differently and they don't work out, well, then we should probably stop. Right? Otherwise, maybe we have an improvement.
Yeah, and it's all about having an effective team. So yeah.
Okay.
Okay, concrete issue.
One concrete issue, and this is like something that it's not very detailed yet because I didn't want to like spend too much time getting details on it. But I want to explain to you what the problem is here that I think we need to solve. Do you have the issue open? Yeah, everyone? Okay. So I think one very concrete problem that systems administrators have, and I've seen this now on a couple of customer calls, is Geo is great when the bar here of like repositories is 100%. Everybody is happy, right? Because this is what it's supposed to do. But, right, one of the I think main tasks that a systems administrator will engage with is to start investigating when the number is not 100%. Right, so let's say we have 97 out of 100 LFS objects are synced, but 3 aren't. At the moment, for anything other than repositories and uploads, and I believe soon design repositories, as a systems administrator, you're essentially done. There is nothing in the UI you can do. Right? The only thing you can do is call the support. and say like, hey, something is not syncing in Geo and I don't know why, right? And then what happens is you will get like a few commands to run, which may or may not be documented, in order to figure out essentially those like 4 things. It's like, which things are not replicated, right? That's always important. Ideally, why they are not replicated, but that's sometimes hard to establish. And then, like some manual action to either re-verify or like essentially retry the replication. And like those are things that will come up because this sort of status interface, right, is the one thing that our Geo customers and the systems administrators, in my experience, look at, right, in order to validate that their system is working as expected, right? And so one thing that we, I think, need to change here is to give systems administrators in the UI sort of a workflow that allows them to like look at the current status, get details, right? Then identify the things that are wrong and offer at least a couple or so of manual interventions, right? As in, hey, let's try this again, or maybe re-verify it, because that is, that will probably, that empowers them to kind of do this by themselves. At the moment, they have to contact support. And the user experience of saying, hey, let's log into the Rails console and then perform these specific commands, right, is not great. I can give you an example actually of this. 1 second. That's like a live thing. Give me like 1 sec. So for example, this is a suggestion to a customer that we like had yesterday, right? Is to like essentially find unsynced attachments, so uploads. A user needs to perform these tasks here in the Rails console. Right? And it's like we actually sent them this and say like, go to the Rails console and do this. And I think what we should do is surface, like essentially do something very similar to what we are doing with design repositories, right? It's like expose an API that allows you to do this, right? And then allow the user interface to, or in the user interface, a way to perform those sort of actions of, like identifying and then re-verifying. There are some problems though. And I think this is now where the design part comes in. And Zach, maybe you have something to add here. We do this kind of already for uploads and projects, right? So you can go, and this is sort of at the bottom, the second screenshot, you can go and you have sort of like other pages that allow you to go there and then like look at all your projects, all your uploads, right? And then look at like synced, pending, failed. You have like some options like re-verify or resyncing. You can filter, you can perform some batch operations. So we have parts of this functionality already, but not for everything. And so there is a little bit of a concern on my end that this sort of pattern that we have here doesn't scale super well, right? Because essentially for every new thing that we have to add, right, we would have to like add a new page, add this filter, right? And then we end up with like 10 or 15 like bits in the menu. So this is now where I am at. This is the problem, right? And I think it's worth solving. I think we have several strategies that we could employ here, right? We could just iterate, right? Like, and be very boring and just copy paste the same interface again, like 3 or 4 times until we're done, right? And do the relevant backend work on top of it. And I think this is something that I would like to maybe engage with, is like start to think about how we can surface this information in a better way that is a little bit more scalable, especially given that we are going to add new things in the future, right? So that's a concrete problem that I think would be interesting to solve.
Yeah, and just to iterate on what you just said, that's exactly what we did on the new designs repositories view right now that's
Yes.
in flight. So continuing to do that could be not good. And so like one thing that I really have been thinking about, like when I'm working on this, is who, and feel free to shoot me down, who actually cares about the stuff that's successful? Like the individual items. Like I you know, I'm sure that someone wants to see that it was successful in some sort of like big, larger way. But you know, once things are successful, I don't really think. I mean, personally, I don't really need to see it anymore. Like I need to see I want to find the problems. So
yes,
that's why I'm in this view. So that's definitely something to think about.
Yeah, I think that's actually quite right, because the pattern that I've observed from customers is, if everything is good, like everything shows 100%, the summary view is perfectly fine, right?
Yeah.
Because you look at it, you say like 100% is 100%, unless they're lying, right? I am satisfied, right?
Right.
But as soon as that like goes down, people get jittery, right? And it's like I've seen support items where people say like, okay, we have 97%. But this is like either disaster recovery relevant, right? Or like some things will randomly fail for users, right? And so for like, this is a little bit like, unless there is an explanation, right? And it's just like, hey, actually we are, you know, these are pending, right? They will happen, right? That's okay. But as soon as it's like, for some random reason, this is not happening, people get very, this is a support ticket, right? Eric, I think will, like he said, like, yep, people will write, and I see why. But I think it's mainly about the delta, right? The stuff that is not doing what it's supposed to do. The rest is like, yeah, it works, happy.
Yeah.
The only time that I can think of that it's useful to see the things that worked is if you're trying to find the pattern of what is not working.
Yes.
So say, for example, there's a whole bunch of things that synced, and there's a whole bunch of things that didn't sync. But by looking at the successful things, you're able to figure out that for some reason, everything that's syncing starts with, just for example, starts with the letter A, and everything that doesn't start with the letter A is not syncing. Okay, so how does that help me debug this problem? So I think there is still value in showing the successful items, but I think you're right in that it is far more important to surface the exceptions, because that's where the manual intervention is actually required.
Yes.
The success is nice information to have, but it's not as useful as the actionable things. Like, how do I fix the 5 that aren't working?
Yeah.
So normally in this case, like I think, like this is just one idea I'm just like throwing out. Like if some information is not relevant at a certain status, like, so if everything goes well and it's like 100% of repository has been synced, but in case user don't need to take care of, like, okay, I don't need to see the exact number if everything is success and this is just a green light. And if they see the yellow light, for example, and they need to see something in details, I think the best cases could be just using accordion, for example, or giving them the notification like, okay, you have to see this because of this reason, like something is not yet synced for some reason. I don't know, but like, for example, like hiding something that user don't need to see at some point could be accordion or something else. But I think accordion would work, but I think some other idea also might also works. I'm just thinking.
I actually like, I like that idea of, you know, you actually hide what they don't need to see. Like this is the action that the user needs to take. And I guess and I mean, this is worth validating with system administrators, of course, but a lot of the time sysadmins are interested in the action that they need to take, not the actions that they don't need to take, because there's enough monitoring and things telling them what they need to do next. And at the moment, they're looking at the geo screens and trying to determine what they need to do next.
And I think it's also, and that's sort of another thing that I think is, we sync a lot of stuff, right? Repositories, LFS files, artifacts, whatever, right? but for like the sake of the actions that you want to perform on them, it's essentially always the same, right? You want to like restart them, re-verify them, right? And you want to like filter by some kind of like status, right? As in, you know, like have they failed or are they pending or something like that, right? And then there is a type, right? As in, you know, this is a repository. And so like one other thing that just came to mind is like, do all of those things need a like a separate page, right? Or is there like, essentially, can you like present a sort of details view, right? And then you can make the type something that you filter on, because you can say like, oh, I'm actually interested in repositories, right? And the rest I'm ignoring, right? Or you're interested in LFS objects. But like this sort of like having a separate like screen for everything feels very wasteful. Yeah, but these are like, and I think, so this is, we don't need to come to a conclusion in this call, right? But those are the types of sort of issues that we, I think, were not necessarily equipped to tackle particularly well, like until like a month ago or so, right? And so this is, for example, something where working on this together would be really fun, right? Like I opened this issue and I described the problem, and if we now can like go there in seconds, say like, well, actually, you know, from a front end perspective, right, this is challenging because of this and this. Maybe, you know, like this is my view, and you can start thinking about the okay, you know, like why are we surfacing the information in that regard? That can like, and once we have that figured out, right, we can break it down into, okay, in the backend, right, what do we actually need to enable, right, the front end, right, what are the specific tasks, how can the front end look like, right? This is the design, you know, those are the tasks for Zach. And then if we can sort of compile a package, let's say, right, of maybe 10 or so issues that are required to implement that that functionality, right, then I will probably promote this to a sub-epic, right? We say like, this is what we're going to do, you know, and then we're just going to like shove it through the pipeline and finish it as quickly as we can. That's kind of how we do it.
Yeah, that was pretty clear to me. And then I think I really need to spend some time with the discovery phase, because I have a very strong assumption, like this is very personal things, but like based on the description on the handbook, so our primary target user is Sydney, sysadmin, but I think they're very like under a lot of stress because of a lot of information on diverse channel that they have. So I'm just wondering, like, which information do they really need to see, and which information is like, probably it depends on the situation. They need to see something only on certain situations. So I really like to distinguish those things first, and then I can dive into more diverse discussion that we will have in future.
That's a very interesting observation, because yes, there are definitely different phases of a geo installation. There's the initial backfill when all the data is initially flowing from one machine to another. Then there's the constant replication and verification that's happening when it's active and everything's working well. And then there's the whole separate process when things are failing. And that's it's a great way that you've said that there. Like, depending on the situation, they're probably going to want to see different things.
Yes.
And at the moment, in all situations, they get to see the same thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, like, this is genuinely like this specific issue here. It generates a lot of traffic, right, for us, because we kind of know how to fix this, right? If you do some manual things, which are not so well documented, if at all. So like it's really like one of those situations where the user, right, of our system is not empowered to solve their own problem, and so they always depend on us helping them solving it. And that makes me also relatively confident that from sort of a backend technical perspective, this is not impossible, because the functionality already exists on some level, right? we just need to surface it, right? And I think that's kind of the question here. So what do you so this is, I think already it's a relatively sizable chunk, right, of work, I'd say. What do you think about taking this one like up as a first? Let's figure out how we work with each other, like how we can approach this, right? It's not so much about speed; it's more about, like starting to do something concrete, right? That at least helps me a lot, right? Because then it surfaces a lot of the like maybe things where they are confusing, or why, like what we need to do differently.
Yeah, sure. I'd love to. But I'd like to know better. So currently this is just an issue created today, but I like to know the priority in terms of the product. So how do you feel like this issue is very urgent or no? Because I like to more dive into like user in general, like how are they doing, like how are their daily life in their companies, because I might start Googling their blog. Some of the developers has a Medium blog, then I can just see, and then just assuming that, okay, they're doing this and this and this. So
I would say from my perspective, how should I say? It's like we shouldn't focus all of our like effort completely on this and drop everything else, right? That's not the intent. But I do think that this is a concrete piece that of improvement, and I've seen this now a couple of times where we do this with customers, and I think it's sort of from the like UI changes, right? This is maybe one of the first things we should try out, because I think it's concrete enough to do something, and it will have a high customer facing impact. So I think it's hard for me to say how it is in priority compared to all of the unknown issues that we're going to surface in the discovery, right? I can't know that at this point. But I think for like what I know about the UI, I personally like feel this is not unimportant.
If I can ask the question again, like I want to see if I can rephrase the question that Sanjung asked. Is the question actually, how urgent is this in comparison with developing your base understanding of the user of Sydney and the product of Geo? Because you need to spend time getting that base understanding and the understanding of the users before making certain types of decisions about the way forward for that. Is that actually the question, not so much the priority of this, but how important it is against getting that base understanding?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I think I may have misunderstood you. I would say like getting the base understanding is more important, right? It's like you should take the time and get yourself up to speed with like understanding how these things work. But that being said, I think maybe this is just my approach, right? If you have a concrete thing to sort of reference back to, right, that can be quite helpful because it's no longer sort of in a vacuum. But I wouldn't I would say it's probably more important that you get a good feeling for the users and where they are at compared to just jumping right in. But I think that can be a balance as well, right? Okay. Maybe you can't. Like if within the next like six weeks, like we can start working on that, I'll be quite happy, right? This is sort of for the release 12.6, 12.7, factoring in discovery and all of those things.
So what I'd also like to suggest is, while I know that the product designer and the product manager roles are quite different, they both revolve around understanding what users need. And perhaps the methods that Fabian used to onboard himself into Geo and the life of users might also be a way of onboarding, like you might have value in chatting together so that you can share how you did it, because you needed to get up to speed and go through a whole backlog. Sorry, when I say you, I mean Fabian. Fabian needed to get up to speed, get on board with the whole backlog, start prioritizing issues before he necessarily had a complete and holistic picture of how everything fitted together. And so I think maybe the balance that you found, maybe you two could chat about the balance that you found and when you felt comfortable with actually starting to make decisions about what we needed to do. Because it's been
I'm still not very comfortable. So.
Yes, it's been too long since I've done that, so I can't actually remember what the balance was when I started talking.
Yeah. Okay. No, but I as I said, right, I think this is maybe an interesting sort of more concrete like piece of work, right? As in, like something to refocus yourself on. But it doesn't exclude all of the other things, right?
Yeah. Got it.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, also, the thing, this is maybe this is sometimes a little bit GitLab specific, right? It's like, I think sometimes we push ourselves to do things even when they're a little bit uncomfortable, right? Even like when it's not really risky, right? As in, like data loss or like things that can seriously go wrong, right? So the question is also, I think for me, going back to the like big rewrite, it's like we are around now, right? And our customers have concrete problems, right? So maybe there are small things we can do already that make their life a little bit better, right? And it's not going to be amazing instantaneously, but it's going to be a small improvement, right? And I think this is, for example, maybe here in a week we say like, well, actually, like Zach has a suggestion, says like, I have this idea, we could maybe already like merge all of those things into one, and it's not going to be worse than before, but we're going to like already improve it, right? Maybe we can do it, right? And then maybe after that, right, we can like make it even a little bit better because we have a much better understanding of how the systems administrators actually look at it. So that's sort of my view on it.
Yeah, no worries.
Cool.
But I have one quick question. So I think, is there any other designer who already involved in this product, or can I get the sketch file or design related resources from them? If no, then I can just...
The most recent product designer that was working with us was Matej, but he hasn't been extensively involved in the last sort of 3 to 6 months, I would say. But if there's any resources or anything like that, he would be the one who has them. I can ping you his name because I'm never sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly. But he was the person who was most recently working with us.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think Jackie also looked a little bit at some things, so you can talk to her.
Okay.
But yeah, it's in a pretty wild state, I'd say.
Thank you. Yeah.
Cool. I need to leave now.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you so much for this. I will upload the recording. This has been great to all get together, and looking forward to seeing everyone online.
Yeah, bye.
Good to meet you.